Talk about guys, everyday players that we expect on this team, showing out, and they basically gotten a turn through for most of the guys that we are used to seeing on a regular basis here. Some good, some bad. What have you seen so far?
I mean, Noodle Boy's picked up right where he left off last year, just, not doing much of anything. Meanwhile, now we're getting a nice start to the spring from Yoan Moncada and Eloy Jimenez, two guys that have really been lightning rods for this team over the last couple of years, and a lot of discussion centered around these guys. I know there are some people within the fan base expecting Moncada to finally put together a healthy and competent offensive season, as he is going to be competing for his next contract this winter. So, the famed contract year bounce, some people are kind of looking for out of him here. And who knows, maybe they'll actually get it and maybe flip him at the deadline for something useful.
So what you're saying is Matt Crawford may be justified here.
Listen, everyone knows I hashtag stand with Crawford, and I always will. He is a hashtag family man, and I believe in him, and I believe that his position may very well end up being justified here when this thing is all said and done.
All right, we've got a little bit more on Moncada, but we'll save it because that ties into another topic here in our rundown. Let's start with Eloy at the top there. Raking a bit early in spring training, Steve, shooting some gaps, driving some runs home. It's encouraging to see, but then you got to take a step back and be like, well, Hanser Alberto lit up the Cactus League last year too. What do we make of this?
Look, for veteran offensive players, I mean, there's not really much to take from spring training performances, particularly in the Cactus League where the ball does fly a little bit more than down in Florida. Thin air, pitchers struggling with their secondary pitches, so can be a little bit deceiving from an offensive perspective there. With Eloy, look, it's always going to come down to two things. It's going to come down to health, and it's going to come down to ability to lift the baseball. If he turns into that ground ball factory, we've seen how problematic that can be. And if he can actually stay on the field in the batter's box, kind of important. We've seen more frequently than not during his tenure here with this team, he's had a hard time piecing those two things together, the health and productivity aspect at the same time. So until we really see it, I'm not going to take a whole lot from, a good week in the Cactus League here. Although everyone knows I am a big believer that you hashtag set the tone for the season in Arizona here. But with Eloy, I need to see a little bit more proof in the pudding.
Right. I got a couple remarks on Eloy here. It's better to see doubles to the gap than it is weak groundouts to the infield. So I'll take that. I'll take that. No, you can't make too much out of it, so take it with a grain of salt as well. But when you got a team that I know it's Cactus League here, but we're 3-8, struggling to score runs. When a guy can actually go and bring those home, it makes it a little bit more hopeful because I was just thinking about Saturday's game, like that 14-3 loss against the Rangers. Once again, it's Cactus League, but it's never fun to get your ass kicked. So Eloy bringing home some runs is at least positive in my mind. On the other side of that, beyond on-field production, there's been much made about these guys kind of gassing each other up or propping each other up, right? The Luis Roberts and Eloy Jimenez and Yoan Moncadas of the world, that kind of triangle, right, of what you expect to be your everyday core that's left, I guess. I want to see that actually come to fruition because it feels like all these other teams have good camaraderie in the clubhouse. Then it leads to a surge as a team, right? I feel like we've never seen that even when things were going okay in 2020 and 2021.
Well, a big part of the problem was that triumvirate right there, you've had a hard time keeping them in the lineup at the same time together. I've written about that, the problems from that aspect of things here, but you're absolutely right, Jonathan. If you could get the three of them healthy in the lineup consistently together, it would finally be interesting to see if they could play off of each other and if maybe they inspire a little bit better performance and a little more focus, because that's something that gets called into question quite a bit with all three of them, if we're being completely honest. So if they can say, hey, this is a big year for all three of us right now, let's all really put this thing together and kind of show the baseball world that we are better than what we have shown to this point, with the exception of Luis Robert Jr., because, look, he performed like an MVP candidate a year ago. So he has shown that more so than the other two really have.
Well, one thing that I would just finish up with on this front is you had mentioned Luis Robert Jr., and he has the production on the field from last year's excellent season, right? Stayed healthy for the most part as well, barring that little tick up at towards the end of the season. He's done it there on the field, so we already know that. We know what kind of caliber player is. It would be very nice, even if it was behind the scenes, if he took a little bit more of a leadership mantle this year. I would like to see that, and I think that would be beneficial for this clubhouse. It talks a lot about culture, and as you get fancy catchphrases that we'll get to in a little bit here.
It's fascinating that you bring up the leadership aspect of it. That was something that was really touted with the hashtag Trader Jose Abreu during his time here with this team. I think especially with the Latin contingent of players, he was, thought of and talked about publicly as being kind of a father figure of sorts. Somebody has to kind of step in to fill that gap, so to speak, right there. And Robert is a guy that we know will be here. He's under contract for another 3 seasons after this year. So assuming things don't continue to go wrong and he, potentially gets moved before that contract expires, he's going to be here for the duration. So seeing him really take on the responsibilities of a leadership type role would definitely be valuable. And, you think about somebody that I know we're probably going to get to here a little bit later on, Oscar Colas. Seeing Robert kind of take him under his wing a little bit and say, hey, these are some things that you need to do to kind of get back in the good graces and find yourself and find a way back on the field and maybe into the future plans a little bit. That'd be interesting to see.
Right. Yep. Exactly what I'm looking for. So, but we'll see how that shakes out. Once again, we're just a little over a week into Cactus League action here. But with that, we've basically gotten our round of seeing most of our regular starting pitchers at least once, some of them a couple of times here. And I want to start with one that is kind of eye-grabbing mainly because of the opponents he faced, but then how he fared against them. Garrett Crochet made his spring training debut, and it also coincided with Shohei Ohtani making his spring training debut for the Dodgers. And he froze Shohei Ohtani in that first at bat, got him strikeout looking. Crochet added another 2 innings of scoreless ball here today on Sunday, March 3rd, before we recorded this episode. What have you seen from the big lefty so far?
Crochet has certainly started out in his first 2 outings, and he has looked every bit as electric as he was when he came up during the COVID-shortened 2020 season. He's kind of looking similar to the guy that was drafted out of the University of Tennessee and rushed to the major leagues without throwing a single pitch in the minor leagues. He's not throwing 102, 103 anymore, but he was hitting 98, 99 in that start against the Dodgers. I didn't see any of the radar gun readings here today against the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim of Orange County of California, the Pacific time zone. But I know some of the highlights that I did see, the stuff looked electric once again. And I personally have really called into question what his role is going to be on this team going forward. There's been talk about trying to transition him into the starting rotation. I've publicly come out and said that I don't believe that to be a viable option here. But again, I would love for Garrett Crochet to prove me wrong. I just don't think there's enough volume under his belt here to really justify that. But, hey, the early returns this spring have looked positive, and he's looked a lot more dynamic than when we last saw him taking the mound for this team.
Yep, encouraging on that front, and I agree with the roles situation here. It'll be interesting. It's hard to exactly carve it out because we are still early in the spring training calendar. Just flipped to March here, so we're talking early here. But I thought it was interesting, and I know they're on the schedule with throwing plans and stuff, but it was not a start today, technically, even though the guys only go a couple innings in Cactus League action. It was Fetty day, first time seeing him as well, and then Crochet through the next 2 after Mr. Eric Fetty. So another guy that we saw. Another guy that has been subject of, a lightning rod, like you said about some of the position players, is Michael Kopech. And he was Kopeching in a start against Cubs in our first look at him. However, he came out of it unscathed, and it looked like he reined it in a little bit better than we had been used to seeing for the duration of last season.
Yeah, one of the issues, obviously, that was really plaguing him last season was the control in the strike zone here and the walks. In his 2 innings yesterday, he was able to have 5 strikeouts and just the 1 walk, but there were still a number of deep counts, a lot of 3-ball counts in there, as he was working towards those 5 strikeouts. being more efficient. And I talk about this pretty regularly on the show, talking about inefficient strikeouts. If you're going 3-2 on a lot of guys and you're getting those strikeouts, okay, sure, it looks nice in the box score, but that's how you only end up covering 15 or 16 outs if you're having to expend 6, 7 pitches to get those strikeouts right there. So really focusing and attacking the zone, having better command within the strike zone, they're working ahead of hitters, staying ahead. That's going to be one of the big keys for Michael Kopech here. So obviously, as the lead Bannister bot on twitter.com here, that's one of the things that I'm hopeful that our new pitching czar is going to be able to help Michael Kopech for here in the 2024 season.
Right. And also, once again, important to note, only one outing here to go off of. I'm sure we'll get another one coming up in this upcoming week as well. But one thing that I was texting with our guy, Aikins, about on this, and it relates to, sure, the performance, but then also the confidence, the mental aspect of the game, because that has been a much, discussed topic surrounding Michael Kopech throughout his time, all throughout being a member of the Chicago White Sox. Right. And while I thought it was like, oh, here we go again when he hits the first batter and then he walks the next one, but then he's able to get out of it. And that was good. And sure, like you'd said, going deep into counts, you have like 5 full counts, I want to say he went to in his outing against the Cubs. But coming away from that unscathed, once again, the results don't matter, or they could, and set the tone terms, right? But seeing that not have a crooked number in the run column or the home run column or the walk, even it was only one technically. I know he hit a batter too, so there were 2 free passes, so to say. I think that will help his mindset going forward, because it's the first step, right? If you're going up a staircase here, first step in building that confidence for this season. And he's talked about, you can't act like last year didn't happen, because it did, but the focus has to be going forward here. And you're much better off with the scoreless outing than say you got roughed up for 3-4 runs in your first Cactus League outing. Am I right?
You're 100% correct on that. Michael Kopech, throughout his time with the White Sox, has shown to be, in some cases, an overly cerebral pitcher and allows things to really permeate into his consciousness and impact him out on the mound. And he can be a very emotional guy out there. We just got to call it what it is. So being able to go out there, have that scoreless outing, particularly after the season that he did have a year ago, that, again, let's be real about this. He's been very upfront and honest about it. He has not run away from the struggles that he had a year ago. He's talked openly about wanting to put all of that behind him here and get back to the pitcher that we saw during, the 2021 season and a good portion of the 2022 season. That was a very effective pitcher for this team. So having that first spring outing there, going scoreless for 2 innings, that's the type of thing that could be a building block for him to continue adding confidence as he inches towards the regular season.
I really hope he can figure it out, man, just because you know when it's right, and we've just seen it in small pockets, really. The stuff can be very, very good, and he can be very effective at missing bats and limiting hard contact and all of that. You just want to see that put together consistently. And for him, so much of that is going to be on the mental side of things, especially as he looks to rebound from pretty damn abysmal 2023, in which he led all qualified starters in walks. So